Do you ever feel like you're getting old? Like how one of your favorite international soccer team's best performance was during the 2010 World Cup and they haven't qualified since? Here's hoping. Anyway, my name is John, and for the past few months I've been watching through every episode of My Little Pony Tales, consisting of 26 episodes at around 10 minutes each. Watching through this series has been a lot of fun, and I'm starting to get a wider idea about the foundations of the franchise. But now it's time to rank and review this series from the bottom to the top. The bottoms being my least favorite, and the tops being my favorite. This was a difficult series to rank, as I didn't immediately get a sense in where each episode should go after watching it. That's why, in order to give each episode a fair deal, I made sure to watch them at least 3 times. But before we begin with this ranking, let's talk about how this series compares to the rest of Generation 1. Here's a bit of history. From 1984 to 1985, Generation 1 began with 2 animated specials where they tried to figure out what the world of My Little Pony is. By this point, they hadn't decided on the cast of recurring pony characters. By 1986, the core of this generation would be finalized with the movie and the My Little Pony and Friends animated series. The generation would be a fantasy adventure with a villain of the week format, stories ranging from 10 to 40 minutes, and various degrees of quality. Check out my previous ranking for more thoughts. The series would follow a lot of different ponies. Too many to keep track of, in fact. However, there were a handful of memorable ponies that would make multiple appearances, such as the likes of Gusty, Shady, Fizzy, or Wind Whistler. But for the most part, we followed a revolving door of different ponies with only the Hugh and Megan as a constant. As the series went along, new groups of ponies would be added to sell a new toy line. Everything from the specials beginning in 1984 to the early episode stories in the 1986 series were written by George Arthur Bloom, who is a prolific children's television writer. Much of the format of this generation was established by him, and eventually the series would end in 1987 after 2 seasons. Then, 5 years later, we would finally get My Little Pony Tales, which was a brand new series that aired on the Disney Channel. This is a very different series that is more of a 90s teen slice of life sitcom where the ponies essentially go to school and live like humans of the late 20th century as compared to the timeless fantasy adventure of the previous century. Here, we follow a core group of 7 preteen ponies with distinct character quirks consisting of Starlight, Sweetheart, Melody, Bright Eyes, Patch, Clover, and Bonbon. An interesting thing of note is that the characters are voiced by teenagers that lends to the authenticity of them. And a familiar name, Kathy Westlock, who would later voice Generation 4's Spike, is credited as a vocal director for the songs. And speaking of returning people, George Arthur Bloom will return to write about a third of the episodes. An important thing to note is that this series is often mistaken as Generation 2 when it is actually part of the first generation, though none of the continuity of the previous projects are here. The series came out during the later half of Generation 1, which is why fans sometimes refer to this series as Generation 1.5. Generation 2 never got an official animated project. On this ranking, I'll be reviewing things and how they connect to me. Quality, rewatchability, and intrigue are typically the key factors that determine what makes a standout episode to me. Please keep in mind that everyone has different worldviews, interests, and experiences, so what I may like or dislike may not be the same as yours. But don't let that bother you. In the grand scheme of things, it doesn't really matter. With that said, let's get started with the ranking. At number 26, we have Shop Talk. The girls learn about Teddy's secret and the news spreads, so the girls try to stop the gossip by using blackmail. Okay, so this is the gossip episode, where the moral is usually that idle gossip is a bad thing and you shouldn't do it because it hurts people's feelings. So how does this show handle the gossip? The episode begins with the girls having a song about how much fun gossip is, giving little examples about the type of gossip that they have. There's a section of the song where they mention that the teacher misspelled a word, except what she has on the board is not a word, it's numbers, so someone's illiterate. But one of the gossip that goes around is the fact that Teddy has a teddy bear. Now, a little bit of background on Teddy is that Teddy is a wannabe tough guy. So having a teddy bear kind of goes against that persona, which leads to a lot of insecurities that we'll find out throughout the show. So the other boy ponies overhear this and they start making fun of Teddy for having a teddy bear. And he lashes out in anger. This really shows how insecure he is. So the girls try to fix this, and so their plan is to have the boys babysit and have them do really weird things. So while the boys do this stuff, the girls take a photo. And so the boys, they get blackmailed into forgetting about Teddy's secret. And then the episode ends. Teddy never learns to accept his secret. Instead, he does very illegal activities in order to keep lying about himself and hold on to his toxic masculinity. Here's the definition of this. And this is kind of a terrible moral. You know, if you're having trouble involving gossip, then it's okay to blackmail others with gossip. Essentially, the episode's teaching us that gossip equals good. No wonder why Teddy is such an abusive character. I understand this is the 90s, so the concept of toxic masculinity isn't quite mainstream as it is now. But I'm quite surprised that this was the route that they took with this episode. I much better prefer what they did with Ponyville Confidential with the CMC. In the end, the episode's desired intention of dealing with the concept of gossip ended poorly through harmful solutions and bad character progression. At number 25, we have Stand By Me. So the girls accuse Teddy of stealing Melody's music player, and so the classroom has a court trial to determine if he is guilty. So here we learn a little bit more about Teddy's character. So Melody's music player stops working, and Teddy wants to show off how cool he is by fixing it, but it backfires and everybody hates him for it. This is a common thing that Teddy does in the show. He tries to do something to make him seem cool, and then everybody hates him for it. It's a common trend. And because of this, his insecurities about himself cause him to lash out, which makes him seem like a more guilty person. So the music player ends up going missing, and the girls accuse Teddy of stealing it. And so the teacher does a terrible job at handling the accusations. Instead of dealing with the problem privately, she decides to hold a mock court trial case to determine the guilt, where the prosecution, judge, and jury are all biased characters who have conflict of interest. It's literally the girls that are accusing Teddy of the acts are the ones in charge of all of this. No one knows where the music player is, but they all accuse Teddy of stealing it. And if Teddy is found guilty in the court, he gets suspended from school. Why is such a serious matter being decided in the classroom? So Sweetheart gets tasked to defend Teddy. She's basically the kind one of the group, who is sometimes the voice of reason, who likes to see the good in others. She's kind of like the Fluttershy and Posy of this show. But in this episode, we see that Sweetheart's friends are actually terrible and petty. She's just doing her job to defend Teddy. They're like, no, we can't be friends with you. You suck for being on Teddy's side. Okay, so with this whole ordeal, without the player, Teddy can't really be found guilty as there's no real evidence that he took it. Sweetheart's defense for Teddy isn't the best. And she has a song where she's singing about like, oh, you don't know about this guy like I do. He actually has a soft side. Except the song is kind of really sad. Because what they show in the song is that she's kind of in an abusive relationship with a very insecure Teddy, where Teddy does something to abuse her and then immediately feels guilty and apologizes, but then he just keeps doing it over and over again. Which is kind of alarming and red flaggish. If Teddy doesn't change himself in the future, things could get pretty ugly in the future with their relationship. Turns out Teddy didn't actually steal the music player. It was just in the lost and found, which no one thought to check. And like what's even more stupid is that the lost and found is inside the classroom that they're holding this court case. In the end, the episode's well-intended story showcased unfortunate unintended issues that ultimately skewed the final product. At number 24, we have Blue Ribbon Blues. So Teddy tries to prove to Sweetheart that he's not a worthless abuser, so he pretends that he's good at farming. So here we have another Teddy and Sweetheart episode. But this time, Sweetheart actually gets tired of Teddy's crap. He's lying, trying to make himself seem cool, but he continues to lie to her. He doesn't open up about him being afraid of the water and that he can't swim. Instead, he tries to deflect by saying, oh, he's actually good at stuff. He's good at farming, which leads to Sweetheart wanting to see Teddy do that. So Teddy constantly makes a fool of himself and backs himself into a corner, into a tangled web of lies. So they go to a farm and they have a song about farming and they do farm stuff. And in this song, we see that Sweetheart and the farm kid starts getting close. So Teddy gets territorial about Sweetheart, claiming that she is his girlfriend, which we've never seen confirmed in any other scene. And Teddy is just antagonistic for no reason. He has this beef with a pig. So the pig decides to retaliate by sneaking into his room at night and ripping apart his teddy bear. And of course, Teddy, being insecure, cannot admit that he has a teddy bear, so he loses it to a little girl just to keep his secret.
You tore my teddy bear, and I'm gonna get you, Yorkie!
And here we see that Sweetheart gets even more fed up with Teddy. She gets so tired of him and his lies. But, you know, Teddy kind of redeems himself by swimming to save the farm kid. So he learns to overcome his fear of water. But Teddy never learned to stop lying and admit the truth. Like, he still lied. He still continued to keep his secrets and make himself look better. Like, he even lied to get his teddy bear back and won't admit that it is his bear. So the lesson of the episode was kind of to show that Teddy had a good side, but we kind of already knew this, since this is what Sweetheart was saying in multiple episodes before. In the end, the episode's desire for character progression didn't succeed and ended in Teddy's continued regression. At number 23, we have Happy Birthday Sweetheart. So the girls prepare for a synchronized swimming competition, but when Teddy sabotages them, they take their anger out on Sweetheart during the eve of her birthday. Alright, so we have more trouble with Teddy and the girls. So the episode starts out with Teddy annoying the girls as they try to swim. So they take payback by squirting him with a water hose. And it turns out that Teddy is such a sore loser that he decides to sabotage them. And during the competition, we get this really ridiculous moment where the ponies kind of look like these dolphins, which doesn't look right. And so Teddy sabotages them, and the judges don't notice, or they do notice, and just don't care. As soon as the girls got disqualified, Teddy immediately knew that he got in trouble, and so he just runs out of there. And the girls are livid, and rightly so. But they take out their anger on Sweetheart. They refuse to go to Sweetheart's birthday party just because Teddy is also going, because Teddy is a friend of Sweetheart. And again, we're showcasing that these girls are terrible friends to Sweetheart. They don't care about her emotions or the fact that this is her special night. They only care about them having to be dealing with annoying Teddy. So Sweetheart announces that the party is off, and again, the girls don't care.
Then nobody's coming. The party's off. Hey, what about my new hairdo?
So Lancer, who is one of the few boy ponies who has a good relationship with the girls, makes a plan for a truce. So he gets the girls and Teddy together, and he spouts out truths at them for their treatment of Sweetheart, and tries to get them to come together. But Teddy never apologizes for anything he did. He doesn't say sorry for screwing up. No, he just continues to act like he was the one who was wronged. And so the party happens, and the girls never apologize to Sweetheart, but Sweetheart doesn't care. She's just happy to have a party with the friends. And, yeah, it just doesn't quite feel right to end it like that. In the end, the episode showcased just how fickle the main friendship is, and how little remorse they have towards their actions, which left the conclusion a little jarring. At number 22, we have an apple for Starlight. So Starlight substitutes for the teacher and has trouble keeping the class in order. So here, we once again see how Miss Hackney is the worst teacher ever. So she comes down with an illness and decides, hey, instead of like letting the class go, I'm just gonna put one of my students in charge and have them play a recording of the lesson. So she puts Starlight in charge, and Starlight is the impromptu leader and somewhat responsible pony. So at least she chose the right pony, but still, she shouldn't be putting students in charge. And again, the teacher shows just how bad she is through her recording.
Bonbon, do you know the answer? If you wanted to lift a 100-pound sack of flour 4 feet in the air... I didn't think so.
Oh, of course you don't know the answer, Bonbon, because you're just stupid. So they have a song about the importance of learning, which is the lesson of this episode, that you should pay attention in school because you can use what you learn in life. But Starlight has trouble conveying this message to the class, so she decides, let's have an unsupervised field trip to some caves. So, yeah, none of the students listen to Starlight. They do illegal stuff going into the caves. Obvious trouble happens. They get trapped. There's this ridiculous line.
Oh, I hate the dark.
Don't worry, Clover. You're with friends.
What good are friends if you can't see them?
Well, you can hear them. So the ponies just end up escaping using what they had learned earlier in the episode. So as an adult, this was a difficult episode to watch. These kids just be troublesome. And no one gets in trouble. Nobody learned that what they did was a bad thing. So, yeah. In the end, the series of bad decisions on everyone's parts and the lack of fault recognition left this uninteresting. At number 21, we have the Impractical Joker. So Patch pulls a bunch of pranks on everyone. So the girls try to get payback with a prank of their own. So this is pretty much just 28 pranks later and the mysterious Ne'er-do-well, which are episodes that I do not like. So the episode is about Patch, and Patch is the pranky tomboy type with a heart for adventure, who pulls pranks on all the others, pretending to be a pop star and inviting others, getting them to all feel bad that they didn't get to meet with a pop star. Patch somewhat pranks Bonbon by filming her for a project, except Patch didn't really do anything. Bonbon ruined it all herself. And Patch tampers with school projects, which goes too far and gets Bright Eyes into trouble. So the girls are kind of fed up with Patch doing all these things, and instead of talking to Patch about this, they decide to pull pranks on her instead. They get her a taste of her own medicine. But they don't work because Patch is a master at pranks. And so Patch has a song about pranks, how much they're fun. So the girls come up with a bigger prank using a UFO and pretending to invade Patch's brain. They claim that the UFO that they made is made out of cardboard, but
Amazing what you can do with cardboard and Christmas lights, isn't it?
that's not cardboard. So Patch is like, oh, I didn't like that you pulled this on me. Except Patch never learned her lesson. Immediately after getting pranked, she's like, oh, this is kind of a fun prank. And she gets inspired even more. And so, there's no moral to this. If there is, it's terrible. In the end, nobody learned their lesson and the conflict only escalated. At number 20, we have Slumber Party. So the girls have a slumber party where they play games, eat ice cream, and tell ghost stories. But paranoia kicks in when noises are heard in the attic. So this is the first episode of the show, and it's quite an odd one to begin the series with. All the remaining 7 are in this episode, but we don't really get a distinction between the character. And there's references to things that felt like the audience should already know, like Miss Hackney. But the girls, they tell a ghost story which has a similar plot to would-be Dragon Slayer. And the character gets attacked by a snake and gets out of it by blowing their tongue at it. I guess let's try that, yeah. So while they're sleeping, they hear a noise in the attic, and they think that the noise is the ghost or the dragon in the story. What's even odder is the pacing. There's a lot of awkward silences in here. Then they have a song about how things aren't what they seem, but the song is like integrated weirdly. So the noise that they heard in the attic was just a cat, so they just go back to sleep. But it actually turns out that the ghost is real, and reveals to Patch, hey, I'm a real ghost. Thanks for telling my ghost story. Peace out. And then the episode ends. Just a weird way to do this. In the end, The lack of world understanding, pacing issues, and underdeveloped plot left this a boring premiere. At number 19, we have The Tea Party. So the girls have a tea party in an abandoned house, but must fight to protect it when strangers break in to seemingly destroy their way of life. So they have a clubhouse in an abandoned house, which is a weird place to have it, and the things that they're discussing in the clubhouse is whether or not they should allow boys into the club. And so they have this song about the pros and cons of boys. But this plot about allowing boys in the clubhouse gets completely sidetracked by the break-in plot of these grown-ups going into the house and taking stuff out. So the girls want to protect their clubhouse, and so they set up these Home Alone traps. There's this whole scene where the adult ponies come in and fall for the traps, but it turns out that the invaders were the real homeowners who were just trying to clean out their stuff. And so, our ponies don't get in trouble for attacking the family. Instead, they get rewarded for trying to protect their stuff with a brand new club on the property. And then the girls just tell the owners to shove off because the club is only for little ponies. How rude. And in the end, they decide to let boys into the club because reasons, I guess. The plot about the boys and the break-in don't mix at all. In the end, the disconnects between plots and an unclear moral left this an entertaining but unfulfilling experience. At number 18, we have Gribbet. So the girls nurse a frog back to health and try to keep it as a pet, but the wild animal cannot be contained. So the girls find this crippled frog and try to decide what to do with it. And a lot of their decisions are quite odd.
I've been reading about frogs in my biology book. Maybe I could operate. My mom's got a great recipe for frog legs.
Bon Bon was ready to eat frog meat. They end up deciding to go to the vet, and the vet tells them to take off the cast in a few days, but they forget to take off the cast.
It's been 5 days and he still can't jump. Oh my gosh, we forgot to take off the splint.
And then they have a whole scene about teaching the frog how to jump, which is pretty unnecessary. And instead of letting the frog back into the wild like they said they would, they decided to continue taking care of it. And the frog almost dies in this blender. And of course, the frog causes more chaos with many different scenarios, as, they wild animals do. And here's the first time where the teacher actually does something right, telling them that the frog belongs in the wild. And so that's exactly what they do. They return the frog to the wild. The frog shakes the hands goodbye, then cries. There's a whole song about how sad this is. And in the end, this was just an episode where a frog did frog stuff. At number 17, we have Who's Responsible. So someone has been polluting Ponyland, and so the girls try to find out who it is. A thing of note is that this episode is written by Roger Slifer, who is the co-creator of the character of Lobo. So Bright Eyes comes in and she gets fired up by the new polluter and gets the girls involved to stop it, but no one understands the cause. Bright Eyes is pretty much the scholarly pony who is the most protective about the environment. So the girls split up to follow different leads, and one by one, they spout out conspiracy theories about who might be doing it, while they casually litter themselves. And there's multiple examples of this. They don't care if they litter, because they think that major corporations must be behind it. So they legally trespass in different places. The ice cream truck driver is very familiar with Bon Bon stealing the ice cream. Patch straight up assaults someone, and here we learn that Patch is illiterate. So the littering that they had been doing causes massive flooding, and it turned out that they were all the real polluters all along. And so they have a song about littering and how to not litter. And Melody doesn't care. She continues to litter. And this is how the show ends, with janky animation. In the end, the environmentalist themes left this an odd ending to the series, but a generally okay execution of its goals. At number 16, we have Out of Luck. So Clover goes to war against a teapot because she thinks it gives her bad luck. Clover can be described as the clumsy one, but the show also calls her the lucky one, which is pretty confusing as those two things don't really mix. Is she lucky or is she clumsy? She's both, except she's more clumsy than lucky. But Clover finds this teapot and brings it to the clubhouse to show everyone, and everyone for some reason thinks that the teapot is magical. So they wish upon the teapot, and instead of what they wish for coming true, the opposite happens. And then Clover has this unmotivated song about how her luck has gone bad, even though just only one or two things happen in the span of 5 minutes. But bad things keep happening around Clover, and most of them are caused by her, like flooding the bathroom or getting an F on your math test. So she puts all the blame on the teapot and she tries to get rid of it. So she throws it away in the trash, but then the trash man brings it back. Why? She gets even more mad at the teapot, so she tosses it into a lake. But a random bystander brings it back, not because they thought that Clover was littering, but because they thought, oh, it must have been an accident. So Clover's father gets mad at her for littering, and so she learns her lesson. And the father ends up using the teapot for the sculpture and sells it for a lot of money. And so this episode has an ambiguous message about luck, and it's kind of like Woe Was Me, where the bad luck was just Clover's imagination. And even though, the whole idea is that her bad luck was just her, pretty much after this point, all of her appearances, she's more of a clumsy character after this point. In the end, the ambiguous nature of Clover's luck and overall episode premise left this a tad perplexing watch. At number 15, we have Sendin the Clown. So Clover feels inadequate about her ballet skills, so she tries out excuses so that she doesn't have to perform in front of her talented sister. So Clover's sister, Meadowlark, visits. And Meadowlark is a professional ballet dancer, and Clover has a song about how much better Meadowlark is at dancing compared to Clover, where Clover is a bit of a clumsy dancer who constantly falls. A cool detail in this show is that we see Clover practice dancing in previous episodes in the background, but here we finally see it coming through. So one of the horse dancers hurts their leg and they have to be put down, and it turns out that Clover is the understudy. But Clover gets anxiety about performing in front of her sister, so she decides to fake amnesia. But it turns out that Meadowlark is a pretty cool character, and she's very supportive. She might be the best character in the show. Clover ends up dancing, and she does it without slipping, so cool. In the end, this was an acceptable showcase of stage fright and performance anxiety. At number 14, we have Just for Kicks. Starlight wants to get her crush's attention, so she decides to join the soccer team. Here we see that Starlight has a crush on Ace, and Ace is the confident jock of the boys. And he's an athlete, and he has a crush on Melody, to the point where Ace steals Starlight's smoothie and drinks it without paying or apologizing. Starlight likes Ace, and she has a song about how she would change herself to match Ace to see that they were a perfect pair. So she decides to join the soccer team to be with Ace. During the soccer practice, whatever they do just doesn't make any sense. Like, they practice for 5 seconds and then the coach is like, that's enough practice, go do something somewhere else. And during Starlight's tryout, Ace fairly outplays her and he gets yelled at by the other girls, which, this is the sport, that's how you're supposed to do it. Why is he getting in trouble for that? And then Starlight becomes sad because of reasons. Maybe it's because she's not good enough at soccer, I don't know. But one of the horses gets a hurt leg and has to be put down, and so Starlight has to replace him. So there's this soccer match, and the soccer match doesn't at all follow the rules of soccer. And Starlight wins the game by kicking good. And then Ace has a bruised ego because he didn't win, but he's impressed at Starlight. And then they end together being happy. A lot of the ideas and direction that they wanted to go here is pretty decent, except it doesn't quite work with this 10-minute format. If this was 20 minutes, I think this would be really good. In the end, the episode length was not long enough to explore the many complicated emotions and story beats needed to convey them. At number 13, we have Birds of a Feather. So the girls get lost in the forest and must find a way out. So here the girls, they go into the forest looking for this endangered species of birds. But they get lost and they lose the trail. even though the trail is right there. They end up getting attacked by bees, and they get lost even more. And then Bon Bon ends up eating a week's supply of food. Bon Bon herself is somewhat of the emotional one who writes in her diary often and is obsessed with food and baking. They decide to go fishing for food, which is, questionable. The fish that they catch is very concerning. But they end up fighting the birds completely by accident. And then they have a song about the beauty of nature. And during this whole sequence, the whole Lost in the Woods plot gets sidelined. And then they come across the deforestation, which explains why the birds are endangered. But the writers completely forgot how to finish the episode, so out of nowhere they decide that Bon Bon's been writing the directions in her diary the entire time. Not once did she think, hey, I've been writing down the directions, I could go and help us. Instead, someone else just pulls it out of thin air. And they end up saving the birds. In the end, the episode gets lost in itself and forgets to come up with a worthwhile solution. At number 12, we have princess problems. So the girls believe that Patch could be a long-lost princess and try to change her way of life into royalty. So here we learn that Patch is actually an orphan, and she had been adopted into a loving family.
It's not so bad here, but I have to confess, having my own parents would be really nice.
You'll get parents someday.
Here we also see that there is royalty in this world, and there are normal big horses that pull the royal carriages. And the royals are looking for the long-lost princess, who happens to have a birthmark on their hoof and kind of looks exactly like Patch. And Patch gets a paint on her hoof, which looks exactly like the birthmark, and everybody thinks that Patch is the long-lost princess. But nobody questions the paint. Patch never even questions that there's paint on her hoof. She's like, oh, I've never seen that before. Must be the birthmark. But there's this completely other pony named Rosie, who is the obvious candidate from the beginning. But the motivation of Patch's friends is not to reunite her with her family, but instead the excitement that Patch might be a princess. But Patch doesn't exactly want the royal treatment, she just wants to continue doing things. But her friends won't let Patch do manual labor, and here we once again see that this group of friends are the worst.
First let me help my dad. Patch, a princess would never ever do something so ordinary.
Get with it, Patch. Once you're a princess, you won't be living with them anymore.
I won't.
Patch doesn't want to leave her adopted parents, but her friends, they don't care. They think that Patch is a princess. Imagine the parents, they're not aware of this whole thing. So if Patch was to go be off with royalty, they'd be all alone. So Patch finally notices that the mark on her hoof is paint. Then Rosie shows up and her eye changes color, and she has this mark that nobody noticed earlier. And then it turns out that she's the actual princess. The lesson of the episode is pretty unclear. I don't know if it's about accepting who we are or what. I don't know. What I find interesting to think about this episode is, what if there was no Rosie to have a happy ending with the royals finding their daughter? What if they never found their daughter? Would Patch have to live with the fact that she could have been the daughter but left that family by themselves? I don't know. In the end, the episode requires a lot of suspension of disbelief in order to make its narrative work. At number 11, we have Too Sick to Notice. So Bon Bon feels neglected because her family has to take care of the sick baby pony. So she decides to fake an illness in order to get attention. So yeah, that baby pony is really sick, to the point that the sneezing shakes the house like an earthquake. And Bon Bon lacks empathy. Here in this episode, she's pretty selfish. She wants attention, but she's not getting it because the baby's sick and her family is taking care of the baby. The thing I want to point out is that Bon Bon is actually voiced by Shira Arzani, who will later voice the character of Daring Do.
I'm fine now. I just needed a little attention.
Aha! These animals are all predators.
So Bon Bon decides that she wants attention, so she fakes an illness. And it backfires because she can't do the things that she wants to do because she has to be sick in bed. A very common episode trope. So here Bon Bon exploits the family, is completely ungrateful towards it. but eventually she feels bad when she's unable to help out. So she writes about these feelings in her diary, and this is actually the first appearance we have of Bonbon's diary in the show. She confesses this to her family, and then the rest of the family either gets sick or fakes it. I don't know. So Bonbon decides to take care of the family, and she lets the baby pony play with pots and pans, and she doesn't really get in trouble for doing all this. Okay. In the end, this was a simple episode with a very familiar premise. At number 10, we have Sister of the Bride. So Clover helps prepare for her sister's wedding, but things don't go as perfectly planned. So here we have a wedding episode. The episode starts out with Meadowlark singing a song about how perfect her wedding will be, but things don't turn out to be perfectly. Clover in this episode is extremely clumsy and ruins things, from the decorations to the cake to the rings. It appears in this episode that Clover has no luck at all, yet the characters keep insisting that she's lucky. They end up bumping into the fiancé where they mistakenly think that he's cheating on Clover, a very often misunderstanding trope in these type of episodes. The mother has the worst stay in the world, who has no faith in Clover because she's clumsy. But it turns out that Clover's sister, Meadowlark, is such a pretty chill pony. She doesn't get angry or break down that nothing is going her way. She just makes do with what she got, which is pretty much like the theme of this episode. And in the end, the episode tells a sweet story despite the ambiguity of Clover's luck. At number 9, we have Roll Around the Clock. Bright Eyes and Lancer want to go to the skate dance together, so their friends give them terrible advice in order to attract the other. It's the classic Be Yourself episode. In this episode, we see that each of the girls has a unique pairing that we only see in this episode. Bright Eyes and Lancer both tell the boys and girls that they like each other, and so the boys and girls give bad advice through song. And obviously, the bad advice backfires. A funny thing to note is that Teddy's advice to Lancer is to be abusive. He hasn't learned anything. Eventually, Bright Eyes and Lancer gets tired of all this advice and they just end up being themselves and they go to the dance. In the end, the episode is a solid retelling of a classic trope, but not a notable one. At number 8, we have And the Winner Is. So Clover wins 2 tickets to a concert and can't decide who to bring with her. So yeah, this is basically the same episode type as Ticketmaster. But here in this episode, we are introduced to the luck of Clover. So Clover wins the drawing, and everybody gets salty at Clover for her winning.
To the winner go the spoils. See, Clove.
Spoils? What are spoils? I'm really truly happy for you, Clover.
Everyone else is upset.
Not upset, disappointed. They're happy you won, but unhappy they didn't. See ya, Lucky. See ya later.
Which again showcased just how not great this group of friends is. But Clover has trouble deciding about who to take with her, and she has a song about the difficulties of choosing. The way things are framed in this episode, it's really not that difficult. It really shouldn't be that difficult for her to decide who to take with her. But Clover ends up just stupidly telling each pony that they're gonna be her choice, which proves that she's just really terrible under pressure. And so all the other ponies, they find out that like they're all going to the concert, and then when they try to confront Clover about it, Clover just literally runs away. She just cannot deal with confrontation. And so the solution to this episode is actually a really fair one. Clover decides to have another raffle again for each one of the 6. And so they solve it. 2 ponies are going to the concert. Except while they're in line to the concert, they are like, oh no, I can't do this without my friends. So they end up selling the tickets and buying pizza for the rest of the group. Which, I don't know. It kind of just doesn't work. If you're doing an episode about like compromise and picking and choosing, having them just give up choosing at the end is probably not the best idea. But in the end, the episode overcomplicates its premise through frustrating choices, but figures it out by the end, for the most part. At number 7, we have the Great Lemonade Stand Wars. So the girls need money to replace a broken teapot, so they decide to open a lemonade stand. Common episode premise of lemonade stand. Turns out that their stand is quite successful to the point where the boys decide to set up their own competing stand out of spite. But the boys take shortcuts and they don't work towards their stand. They have the rich kid finance their stand, and then they can't come up with a recipe of their own, so they decide to steal the recipe from the girls. They have Ace try to impress Bon Bon and get her to tell the secrets. It works. Ace goes on a date with Bon Bon, and then Bon Bon tells the secret. I find this a little funny because Ace is voiced by the voice actor for Light Yagami.
I will become the god of this new world.
You really mean it?
The best.
And so the lemonade stand war ensues. Lancer feels guilty about this, and so he gives the girls a new recipe for iced tea. The girls, they make enough money to buy a new teapot, and then the boys, they get mad for winning the lemonade stand war. They get mad that the girls made money. This episode has no lesson to it, it's just they're selling lemonade. So yeah, in the end, the ponies sold some lemonade. At number 6, we have Ponies in Paradise. So Bright Eyes goes on a foreign exchange event, but lets her presuppositions get the better of her. Yeah, this is the episode with a lot of funny out of context clips. Bright Eyes is excited for her trip, but her friends are pretty xenophobic and they fearmonger to Bright Eyes, which leads to a lot of hilarious clips with cannibals and volcanoes. A lot of these depictions are kind of racist. Again, this is the 90s, so I understand. But Bright Eyes ends up going to the island, where we have an active volcano when she arrives. Keep this in mind. And Bright Eyes struggles to connect with the locals due to her newly found fears by her friends. And of course, all the locals have ambiguous foreign accents. Slowly throughout the episode, Bright Eye eventually begins to see that the ponies are normal and that her fears are like unwarranted. But there's still like very funny dialogue here and there.
The last time we went to the volcano was when we had another pony visiting us from the mainland.
What happened to that pony?
Oh, she's gone now.
Bright Eyes, gets so afraid that she almost falls into a volcano. They point out that the volcano has not erupted in years, except it was erupting when Bright Eyes arrived. And the episode ends with them having a song about how they're all the same. In the end, the episode got the point across well enough despite some poorly aged choices.
Into the volcano, little pony!
At number 5, we have Up, Up, and Away. So Patch constantly ignores safety warnings and gets into trouble. So the episode begins with UFO sightings, and Patch wants to go check them out. And the other ponies tell her to be careful about her adventures, but Patch thinks that careful is boring. But police stop her and tell her no. But Patch wants a life of adventure, and she has a song about this. At the school, they are presenting a guest who has a hot air balloon. Patch really wants to go up in the balloon, but the guest warns her to learn about the basics first. But instead of teaching the basics, immediately the worst teacher leaves in the middle of the class to make out with her new boyfriend. So they leave Patch unattended, and obviously Patch makes some trouble by flying off in the balloon. Bon Bon hangs precariously from the rope. Patch completely ignores her. Of course, everything goes wrong. The instructions get lost, the balloon bursts, the flame goes out, and then for added measure, we have sharks. But they end up getting saved through a Deus Ex Machina through the UFO, which actually turns out to be a pack of alicorns. And they tell Patch to be patient and use caution. Which, of course, Patch does not learn at all. She learned nothing. Immediately after getting home to safety, Patch ignores the teacher who's been scolding her and runs out of class. And she sneaks past the police safety line after being told about using cautious and being patient, They go sneak off to the edge of a cliff. So here we pretty much learned that Patch is possibly worst pony. In the end, nothing was gained from this episode outside of some ridiculous entertainment. And number 4, we have the play's The Thing. So Melody is starring in the school play and lets her ego get to her. So as someone who has done theater for the past decade and has done it professionally for the past couple years, this was kind of hard to watch at points. But this is a Melody episode, and Melody is generally the shallow and self-centered one who is also super talented. In this episode, Melody is such a diva to the point where she disrespects her mother, who tells her to clean her room. Once again, this episode showcases how the teacher is the worst. She's the director, and she doesn't supervise the students who are supposed to be doing rehearsal and setting up the backstage. Especially when Melody doesn't help out backstage because she's the star, and stars don't work backstage, even though that's what they're supposed to do. And so the other ponies, they have a song about the magic of theater, which is, probably my favorite song, being a theater kid myself.
See that mountaintop? Why, it's a painted drop. That's the magic of theater. Fancy dressing gown made of hand-me-downs. That's the magic of theater.
But Melody and the other girls don't seem to go eye to eye because Melody has to be the star and nobody else can compete. They can't even have the same hair. So the solution that everyone has is to gang up on Melody during the rehearsal and ruin it intentionally. Which is, of course, a big no-no in theater, and they should all be fired. Now, the episode is trying to convey that everything in theater is important, not just the star. However, the star can keep going, even if everything around her is not working. As the saying goes, the show must go on. If the lights aren't working, if the sound's not working, the performance just have to keep going. But Melody doesn't. She stops because nothing is working. And the teacher does absolutely nothing about it. So Melody ends up being on TV because she's the star of the play, and I guess there's nothing newsworthy going on in town. Off-screen, Melody learns that the others are important too. In the end, theater wasn't the best choice for the subject matter, but was still entertaining enough. At number 3, we have Battle of the Bands. So Melody wants to perform in a band competition, but forgets to hire a babysitter for her siblings, and is unable to compete. So yeah, this is another Melody episode, and here we get to see her desire to be famous. So her and the band practice, they have a cool song, might be one of the best ones in the show.
Sweet music, ooh, sweet music. I love the sound when you're around. Sweet music, ooh, sweet music. Beautiful harmonies abound.
And one of the band members is kind of a Sunny lookalike. It's probably important to now mention that Melody is actually voiced by Kelly Sheridan, who would later voice iconic characters such as Barbie and Starlight Glimmer from Generation 4.
Oh no! I forgot. We've been so busy practicing. What if it's too late? What if I can't get anybody?
You're adorable, but probably not what Twilight had in mind.
But Melody forgets to hire a babysitter to take care of her younger siblings. She ultimately ends up twisting the rules and brings the siblings to the competition, where she leaves the baby ponies roam unsupervised backstage, where they obviously cause chaos. Here we see that Melody has split priorities, where when she's babysitting, she has to go to the competition, but during the competition, she has to focus on babysitting. So she leaves her band behind for a little bit where they perform without her. And of course, the audience doesn't like the performance without Melody. But whenever Melody joins in, there's very little difference in the performance. But everybody loves that performance. And of course, the band wins the competition, and Melody points out like, hey, Mom will never find out, even though this competition was televised. And Melody has a framed photo of her band right out in the open. And the mother, of course, is aware of this, and she congratulates her for winning. The mother is like, hey, congrats for winning, I'll deal with you tomorrow. We don't ever see what happens, and we kind of assume that Melody gets off too easy. In the end, Melody got everything she wanted even though she was irresponsible. At number 2 we have Bon Bon's diary. So Bon Bon's diary goes missing and she fears that her dark secret will get out. Here we see the struggles of Bon Bon as she wastes her time baking instead of preparing for her test. And because she didn't study, Bon Bon ends up cheating on the test. And she feels really guilty about this, so she writes about this guilt in her diary. We very often see her writing in the diary in the background of many episodes, so here we're finally getting the culmination of it. So Bon Bon ends up losing her diary through an act of God or something. I don't know how she lost it. And of course, Teddy picks it up. We all know Teddy makes the best decisions. When Bon Bon finds out that she lost her diary, she tells her friends, and the friends set up their girl code to not read the diary. And then they have a song about keeping secrets. And then we kind of reveal what each girl's secrets are, where Sweetheart reveals that she likes Teddy. That's not a secret. Anyway, Teddy ends up blackmailing Bon Bon, forcing her to do tedious chores and going to the dance with him. Yeah, so here we see that Teddy is cheating on Sweetheart for whatever reason. But Sweetheart figures out what's happening and confronts Teddy about it by reminding him of a secret in one of the best scenes ever.
I heard a rumor that maybe just possibly you know who has Bon Bon's diary.
Sweetheart, not true.
I sorta kinda didn't think so, cause you know what it's like to have a secret you don't want anybody to know about, right? I mean, you wouldn't want anyone or anybody at all to know that you have a...
Don't say it.
Actually, there's really truly nothing wrong with having a...
No.
Then again, if someone were to know that you had a...
Okay, I get the message.
This scene is the moment where I knew that Sweetheart was probably my favorite character of this show. The diary is returned and Bon Bon confesses the truth to the teacher. Where here we learn that the teacher is actually pretty lenient and respects Bon Bon's personal boundaries. Wow, the teacher actually did something pretty decent. So Teddy and Bon Bon make amends. One of the very few moments where Teddy actually does something nice. But yeah, Teddy still learned nothing from his past experiences and blackmailed Bon Bon, which I'm very disappointed in Teddy. In the end, the episode handled its premise well, even though it came at the expense of Teddy's continued regression. And at number 1, we have the masquerade. So the girls go to a school masquerade, but Bon Bon is feeling insecure about what others would think of her costume. So the thing to point out is that this episode is written by Marv Wolfman, who is a very prominent DC comic book writer who wrote very popular stories such as Crisis on Infinite Earths. And in this episode, we continue to see that this is the worst teacher ever. In the beginning of the episode, she announces that they're gonna have a masquerade that very night. And they're all supposed to have costumes, specifically towards their desired career. You don't do that! These are children! They need weeks of preparation. The parents need to know ahead of time. You don't just announce such a big event the day of, a couple hours before the event. What? Besides that conundrum, here we get a really good sense about the characters want and we really get to see their personalities. Here we learn that Starlight wants to be a teacher, Sweetheart wants to be a doctor, Melody wants to be a famous rock star, Bright Eyes wants to be an environmentalist, Patch wants to be a circus clown, Clover wants to be a ballet dancer just like her sister, and Bon Bon wants to be a supermodel. All this is told through a song, which has some interesting imagery. But Bon Bon struggles with her self-esteem, thinking that the others will make fun of her for it. So we go to the masquerade where, of course, there's this big misunderstanding with Bon Bon where she thinks that they're laughing at her. So she runs away into the woods, they go after her, and they have an easy solution where they're like, hey, we weren't laughing at you, Bon Bon. But the pad out time, we have forced danger as Bon Bon's about to fall off a cliff, and then there's another easy resolution where they save her. So then she reveals to her friends her new model costume, which lacks anything altogether. I guess we know what kind of model she wants to be. I think that this would have made a really good first episode of the show. Here we get a good sense on the characters and their desires, and we get to see some of the other characters like Lancer and Teddy, and even the terrible teacher. But in the end, The episode gave us a good look at the hearts of the characters and executed its themes decently. That was my ranking for this generation of episodes. Let me know in the comments what you think of these episodes. I'll be back next time to rank and review Generation 3. And if you want to check out my initial reactions until then, click the link in the description below. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you all next time. Bye.